Ephesians chapter 2, verse number 19 says, "Now therefore you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God." For those that may not know me through the video, I was a foreigner to the United States of America. I moved to the United States as a missionary kid, and I had a dual citizenship. I was English-Romanian. And as I read this verse in Ephesians chapter number 2, I had the privilege of becoming a U.S. citizen this past week, so I'm officially Americanized for the rest of my life. But all jokes put aside, it was a very interesting process, a long process that it took us to become citizens. And what I'd like to do is just share with you what it took to become an American citizen. We could have just flown into Mexico and drove over the border, but we believe in doing things the right way, and so we did everything that we had to do. One of the first steps in trying to become an American citizen is you have to actually live in America for 7 years at the least. You can travel out of country, but I believe there's a certain time limit with which you have to be back in the United States. And in those 7 years, you have to get a social security number, you have to get a driver's license, have to get a job, have to be able to make money and live. So pretty much you have to act like an American for 7 whole years. Not only that, but secondly, after you've completed that 7 years, you can apply to become a citizen. And once you've applied for American citizenship, they actually give you a few papers with 100 questions about U.S. history that you have to start learning. So the second thing that I had to do was I had to know the history of the United States, which is kind of funny because it's like going back to school whenever I've already graduated high school, but you have to start learning the U.S. history, different presidents, different times, the wars, and all that type of stuff. Thirdly, you have to be a good person. You can't come to America and be there 7 years and know the history, but go and live a bad life. So whenever we had started to learn the history, they scheduled us for an interview. We were able to go to New Orleans, and they interviewed us for things such as, are you involved in any terrorism activity? Are you involved in any gangs? Do you own any weapons? What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on that? And they get to know you as a person, know if you're a good or a bad person. I guess at the end of the day, you can fake as much as you want to fake, but the government does end up finding out about everything. But you had to be a good person. You couldn't go and live out like the world. Not only that, but fourthly, you had to pass a test. So at the end of the interview, at the end of asking us about activity and terrorism and all that stuff, we actually took a test on those questions that we had to learn. Now, as I said, we were given 100 questions, but they only asked 10 of them, and we had to get 6 of them right. If you got any less than 6, you would be sent back home and wait another 6 months until you can come back. So it was a pretty big deal to be able to go through the United States history, learn these questions, and you couldn't just learn 10 of them, but you had to learn all of them because you had no idea which questions they were going to ask. Actually, I believe that out of myself, my brother, and my parents, I believe none of us got one of the same questions. So they were completely different. So it was very important to be able to learn that. So you had to pass the test. After you pass the test, you start getting a little bit closer, and you have to end up promising to serve the United States no matter what. So in time of war, which I believe we're not too far from at the moment, in time of war, I have to be willing to promise to serve the United States and forget all my past allegiances to the country of Romania and the country of England. So if those 2 countries or 3 countries come to war together, I have to promise to fight with the United States of America. And once we've lived 7 years, once we've known a little about the history, been a good person, passed the test and promised to serve, we come to the last step of becoming a U.S. citizen, and that's actually reading an oath. It was very interesting that it didn't have us repeat after me. They didn't have us write out our own oath of what we thought it should be, but it was a little piece of paper that had the oath that we had to read word for word, hand raised, and read the oath in our allegiance to the United States of America. So after that, we officially became United States citizens. No longer had to carry the green card around. We can apply for a U.S. passport and actually have the privilege to vote just like any other U.S. citizen. So definitely a long process, 7 years plus a few months of getting ready and getting the citizenship, but it was all worth it. I believe that the Lord meant it for good. However, back to Ephesians chapter number 2, whenever the Bible talks about not being strangers or foreigners, but being fellow citizens, it's not talking about being American citizens here, but it's talking about being citizens of heaven. And I want to focus a little bit right now on how do you gain your heavenly citizenship. I know a lot of us may already know, but there's a little twist within this U.S. citizenship that really got me excited on how we can gain our heavenly citizenship. We know that living a certain amount of years like a Christian won't get you into heaven. We know that just knowing the history, knowing the entire Bible, you can quote it word for word if you want to, it won't get you into heaven. Being a good person, doing everything good and not doing bad things won't get you into heaven. Passing a test, if I could write out a test with some of the hardest questions out of the Bible and you could pass it 100%, it still would not guarantee you a place in heaven. Even if you promise to serve in your local church, if you promise that you'd be there every single day to vacuum the floor, scrub the toilets, put chairs up and all kind of things, you are not promised a place in heaven. Not only that, but even reading an oath word for word like I did. If you were to pray a prayer word for word, just basing your faith in those words won't get you to heaven. You say, Brother Jordan, what exactly does get you to heaven? We know that it's the blood of Christ that gets it. We know that it's by grace through faith. But let me explain a little bit here on how the U.S. citizenship worked. My little sister, Joy, 16 years old, didn't have to do any of this. Didn't have to learn any of the questions. Didn't have to take a test. She didn't even have to tell them she was not part of a terrorist organization. So secretly, she may be a part of a terrorist organization. But she didn't have to answer any of those questions whatsoever. At the end of the oath, at the end of everything, we become U.S. citizens, they said there's a very important part of this for parents to understand. So before we all left out, she made it clear that any children underneath the age of 18 automatically became citizens if their parents were citizens. What you trying to say, Brother Jordan, that if my parents are citizens of heaven, I'm a citizen of heaven? No, what I'm trying to say is that because Joy had my dad as her dad, who was already a citizen in the United States of America, she automatically became a citizen. And so you know what you need to do in order to become a citizen of heaven? You got to have a heavenly father. You got to have your father who's already in heaven, and then that citizenship is automatically imputed to your account. See, no matter what you do, no matter how much you try to be, no matter how good of a person you try to be and how many good things you try to do, it does not matter. All that matters is that you have a heavenly Father who his heavenly citizenship becomes your citizenship. And the special part about this is that, our heavenly Father has already lived the life he's supposed to live. He already knows the history. He already has been a good God. He already has passed all the tests for us. He already has promised to be there with us, and he has already provided the way of salvation for us. So see, we don't have to worry. All this stuff that I did for my citizenship, you don't have to worry about any of that for your heavenly citizenship. All you have to worry about is making sure that you have a heavenly Father who made a way through Jesus Christ that his citizenship automatically becomes your citizenship. And only then can you claim Ephesians 2:19 that says, "Now therefore, you're no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God."